Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of the Lodgge Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Milley, and joining me today is my unique, talented guest, Chloé Giusti. Chloé, how are you doing today?
Good. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Really glad to have you here. Chloé is the ID at Xbox regional lead for the Americas and has over a decade of experience working in the gaming space. Today, we're going to be discussing working with developers and how they can work with ID at Xbox, all the way from pitching to launch day and beyond. So, without further ado, let's get into the conversation. So, Chloé, get this conversation started. It's the first thing I love to ask people that I get to meet. And now, with a new season of the podcast, I want to have it as our opening question. So, what is your 2024 gaming resolution? Is it playing more games with your kids, completing, a series that you just haven't given time to, or more Game Pass, something like that? What do you have for us?
Well, I had to think about that one because I do play with my kids fairly regularly, but I especially watch my kids play more than play with them. So playing more with my kids is definitely a gaming resolution, but also making time for completing a few games and many games that I've started and never had a chance to finish. So the list is ever expanding, fortunately, unfortunately, but that's my gaming resolution.
The backlog always just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
10 games come out every time you finish one. Is there anything you're really looking forward to in 2024, even on the Xbox slate? Is there one in particular that you got that date, circled on your calendar?
Oh God, way too many actually to list. I play a lot of smaller, shorter games, which is awesome. I still don't get to finish them, which is a little bit sad. But and there's just so many good things coming on the horizon that a lot of it I can't talk about. But
Fair enough.
very, very excited for the year ahead. I mean, 2023 was outstanding in the quality and volume of games that released. But 2024 is panning out to be pretty exciting too. So
Especially with that Xbox developer direct really gave us a shine on a lot more things than I was expecting coming in 2024, which
Indiana
is
Jones.
yeah, it's outstanding to see that release date. That was very, very exciting for me and my friends.
That was my my top one in that developer direct.
It was, and I love Troy Baker. That just makes me so happy. So with your experience throughout the industry, namely with Team Blue and Team Green, what was it about Xbox and the Microsoft organization as a whole that you thought made an ideal fit for you? Because I believe you've been there for just over 3 years or almost 3 years.
Yeah, coming up to 4 in
Coming up to
March.
4. There you go.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. So
That's the scary part. I knew it was March 2020, and that to me, wow. Okay, please continue.
yeah. When I remember the moment I read the role description, and it was specifically looking after smaller teams, and some larger ones, but teams that were independent developers. And back in my days in Team Blue, I was, the new kid in the team, and I was saying yes to all the new accounts. And when you say yes to all the new accounts, usually you get a very eclectic selection of partners, and not always, your kind of standard AAA publisher. And so at the time then, I was working with teams that were trying to do things that were completely new on console, and definitely at least on PlayStation back then. And that was so exciting because it meant that I could speak to a lot of different parts of the organization to figure out new things, right? And so when I read the job description of the role with ID at Xbox, I thought, oh, this is what I'm going to get to do. I'm going to get to work with some of the most innovative teams out there, and some of the most creative people out there, and that's what really appealed to me. Some smaller than others, some with bigger budgets than others, but at the core, usually when you work with independent developers, they're the ones who try things that have never been done before, and that means that when joining a company like Microsoft and Xbox within that, you're encouraged to knock on some doors and try out new things, and that's really interesting, even from a larger org point of view.
That you're able to like, I think for me, like obviously it's not revolutionary to say this, but like that's where we're seeing a lot of the games with a real message behind it, right? That it was clearly like built from the ground up. A lot of these really personal experiences, like recently with Venba,
Yeah.
just seeing those like core, the heart and soul that gets poured into some of these indie games, and you being able to kind of see the whole landscape and getting all these different pitches and kind of see them come to fruition. Is there like a unique point of pride for you when you like can remember reading a pitch of a game all the way until you see launch day and you see the team kind of building up? Is that something that you really take a lot of like value out of?
Oh yeah, it's so enjoyable seeing those projects, come to life. I mean, there's some pitches that I remember seeing that literally gave me goosebumps when I looked at them, and then the game goes live, and you're like, finally, I get to play it, but then like hopefully hundreds of thousands of people are going to get to play it as well, and there's something really special about that. And to know that maybe you've played like a tiny little part in helping them bring the game to life is such a good feeling. And I know that's I speak for many in the ID team when we look back and we go, oh, do you remember when we saw this first pitch in 2020, and it was just a concept, or whatever it was, and or when we were talking to a team and it might be their third or fourth or fifth title, and that one makes it big, and but you've been talking to them since the first title that was maybe just a drop in the ocean, or maybe it felt miserably and it was terrible, but people learn from iterating, and then get a big success, and it's really great to see.
That's the thing. I'm definitely most jealous of your job is you get to see that from the beginning, from before anyone knows about it, when it's just a small group of people putting together an idea, something that they're dreaming of doing, all the way into recognized critical acclaim and success, whatever that means to that studio, right? So
Right.
that's always cool to be able to see. So I think that actually leads us into the meat of this conversation, where I want to start going through what is it like to pitch to Xbox? What can people prepare? What can they expect from that experience? So let's start high level. So Xbox receives quite a few game pitches, I imagine. What are some of the key items you look for in inspecting a pitch?
Yeah, we've tried to put in place some guidance for that. It used to be a very manual process. We used to receive an email with a pitch of your chosen format, and individuals would look at it and then share it amongst our peers, and talk of it in front of other people. And it was it was okay, but it was not ideal to deal with a lot of volume. But also, it meant that we received pitches of various different format, with various level of information. So at the end of August last year, we actually launched our live pitch submission form, pitch your game submission form. And that's on the ID at Xbox portal. All you need to do is be a registered partner with us, which means you put in your information on the portal, you sign an NDA, and then you can submit your pitch. And we actually guide some questions through the pitch form. So some of it is pretty basic, name of the developer, point of contact, name of your game, genre. And then we get into a few deeper questions, such as obviously, talking about your core gameplay mechanics, but also things like, how long does it take for a player to really start having fun with your game?
Yeah, fair
What
enough.
feelings are people going to be left with after they play your game? And so we try and have some obviously some necessary quantitative questions. It's good to know about the scope of gameplay. It's good to know, obviously, if it's a single player, multiplayer, the type of business model you're adopting. Are you free to play, premium? Do you plan DLC? Those are what I consider the very minimum, basic questions that we need to know about. And then there's everything else to get a sense about your actual game. Is it a game that's going to make me feel really pumped up, or is it a game that's going to make me feel nostalgia? Is it a game that I don't know, will inspire me to go on and travel, and maybe it's none of that, and that's totally fine. But we're trying to really, through a piece of form online, invite you to tell us about your game. You can attach a pitch to the form, and we definitely encourage you to do so. You can submit gameplay trailers if you have them, or any visuals can be submitted with it. But hopefully the pitch questions in that form give you a good structure so that everyone gets the same chance and we have the same level of information from all the submissions.
Got it. Cool. So obviously, yeah, again, you guys receiving so many different pitches, and having that, application probably standardizes it a little bit more. Is there anything else that studios can do, or like best practices that you in particular, or your team, not things that you don't want to get too granular in the application, of course, but is there anything that you really look for, or something that really shines to you, like you're even mentioning with like a tone, so having like a mood board slide, something like that? Is that something
Yeah,
that you
mood
guys
board
encourage?
slide. I'd say I said that it depends really where you're at with your game, right? So if you're really early on, pre-production, prototype phase, you might not have any art assets yet. So mood board is super helpful to understand what your target art style is going to be. But the things that I found helpful are comp slides. So to me, there's two types of comps. There's your game description comps. So which games do you aspire to be like? And those they don't necessarily have to be commercially successful, although that's great if they are. But it's really to understand what your game is about. So if it's a, indie title that might not have sold great, but that you absolutely love and you're taking inspiration from that game for your own, then it should absolutely be in there. But then also try and have a mixture of more recent titles in there, because if you're pitching to get funding, or if you're pitching for Game Pass, obviously we lack innovation. Games that were made 15 years ago might not be as interesting to us as games that are made in the last couple of years. So while it's great to have comps for what has inspired your game, then you really want to have comps for what where you imagine your game to be at once you release. And so for that, I definitely recommend looking at more recent comps, but also realistic ones. If you're doing a first-person shooter, do you really want to compare yourself to Call of Duty? Or do you want to compare yourself to a more achievable target? And that's not to say that your game might not turn into a Call of Duty success, but being as successful as Call of Duty takes millions of dollars and years of franchises. So it's just good to be realistic about what you're aiming for, because then then we see that you've thought about your game and about what it can achieve in a realistic way as well.
So keep it realistic, keep it as
Recent.
long as and keep it recent. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was like, so keep it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I wonder how many of those studios, obviously I know you can't share them with us, but how many of them are talking about games from 10 15 years ago, and that being completely different ecosystem, completely different wants and needs from the consumer base. So that's something that I think a lot of people should take to heart. Try to do something a little more recent, something that we've seen maybe in this console generation would be obviously ideal. But so once I've pitched my game to Xbox, what type of resources is Xbox able to provide? I know you mentioned funding, marketing resources, technical support, QA. What can we expect once we've pitched our game and we want to start working together?
Yeah, I'll start with I guess, the standard level of support. So you've pitched your game to us. In worst case scenario, you do not land any level of partnership with us, but you can still obviously release your title on the platform. And I should preface that by saying we say no an awful lot, and it doesn't mean that your game is bad. It just means that we have to make some really tough decisions as to what proceeds further for Game Pass considerations, for example. So while we say no a lot, that means there's plenty of really, really cool games that come to the platform, not in Game Pass. And so as part of that, we have some work that we do with our marketing team. And we start that work really as early as it makes sense for you. As the developer or publisher. And we work with you to figure out what is the best time to announce. What are you announcing? Are you announcing the game with gameplay? Are you announcing the game with a CG trailer? Are you announcing a date? Are you announcing platforms? All of that. And so depending on what the response is, then we'll figure out opportunities on our side to highlight, your title. And it could be that, hey, we've got a showcase coming up at some point that, aligns well with your dates to announce. Or we might be working in partnership with IGN, which we've done in the past, and I'm sure we'll do again. Or we might have an Idea at Xbox showcase coming up as well, where we can include your title in there. So there's various key bits that will work with you to hit. And then there's also social amplification that the team will offer. We have our own Idea at Xbox social channels on X. Still doesn't feel right.
No, it never will. I don't think it ever will.
As well as YouTube. We have Discord channel as well, which I definitely recommend partners to join. It's a really friendly channel and here for the community to engage together. And so there's various ways of supporting partners. And then before we get to the deeper kind of marketing side of things, as you mentioned, we have developer support. We have certification support with ID Cert. Those guys are literally an encyclopedia of all things certification. They're incredibly responsive considering how many partners they deal with. And they're really here, to help. And the sooner you reach out to them, the better. We can help when we have time to anticipate challenges. But obviously, if we find out about, a submission the day of, if there are complicated multiplayer components that involve some tricky XRs, it might take a few days. So planning ahead is always the recommendation.
So the open communication. So it sounds like just having that content back and forth between your team and theirs seems to be the way to go. And that's one thing I have heard of, a few different studios that I worked with Xbox, of that QA support and that tech support, maybe something that they weren't fully, prepared for. Because one thing I did want to bring up is that, so in Ontario, right, we're a hub for independent developers, right? There's over 400 studios here. The majority of them are independent studios. Most of them tend to focus first on, getting their game on PC, namely Steam, right? And then console kind of either as an afterthought, or it depends on funding, or, how certain relationships develop. So do you believe that most of these studios going with you should be focusing on going console and PC day and date? Or do you think that there are situations that may benefit if they do, focus on PC first, and then, the console launch can come second?
Yeah, this is, I think in an ideal world, and that's assuming you've got the resources and the funding, sim shipping obviously will give you more bang for your buck. It's one marketing campaign. It's, one big launch effort across platforms, obviously. And so, in an ideal world, we definitely recommend that. But having said that, the reality is it's really, really difficult to sim shape, especially when you're a smaller team or, when you have limited funding. So Steam is obviously very, very often the first platform to launch, and it's also a way of building your community. A lot of titles will utilize early access on Steam before they launch at 1.0 on consoles. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's great to learn from the early access phase and fine tune, your title. We do have game preview on Xbox, but again, it's a different platform. So getting to the point where you can handle 2 SKUs and keep up with version numbers and make sure that your content updates are synced and all of that is a lot of work. So wherever possible, it's great to Steam ship. If you can't, then it's a wonderful way of building up your community and also building up some revenue to then hopefully be able to come to console. We have the Developer Acceleration Program, which we refer to as DAP. And a lot of the titles that come through the Developer Acceleration Program have already released on Steam or are about to release on Steam. And that's very much the nature of those indie projects with much smaller teams. And so we're absolutely okay with that.
So I think the only argument that I've really heard, maybe against that, and that's why I'd love to hear your opinion on that, is there certain studios that are like, okay, we want to get things on Steam, and then it'll be a kind of a second boost for our game when we launch on Xbox or we launch on Switch or whatever it may be. So does it look like from like on a numbers perspective that sim shipping just makes more sense financially, that it should be off once instead of 2 separate launch days, 2 smaller boosts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends on the game. If your title is a multiplayer title, then I think the more platform you can hit, the better, because you'll have more player engaged from the get-go, and it'll make your game more fun, and therefore, more likely to succeed. If you're a single player title, and you're releasing first on Steam and then you're going to console, that can definitely, give you a second breath of life. And it might even boost your Steam numbers as well, because you'll get some visibility through your console launch. If it's a Game Pass launch, obviously we put our weight behind, the Game Pass campaign. And while I can't talk of specific titles, we've definitely seen titles that saw a peak of engagement on Steam when they launched on Game Pass and Xbox, 3-6 months or even a year later. So that and that's great for us. We love seeing that, because if a title is coming to Game Pass, is because obviously we wanted it for our subscribers and because we love the game. And so to see the title get a boost on other platforms because of the visibility that it has on Game Pass, that's brilliant. We're super happy about that, because that makes the studio, more money, and that means they can make more games and maintain their current games better, and it's win-win all around.
Okay, so both are viable, but in a ideal sense, it would all be sim ship and everything kind of get out the door at once and keep everything updated. But there is a benefit if studios are kind of limited in resources.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. So I've pitched my game. I've worked with Xbox. We've gone through the QA process, and we're leading up to launch. So as a developer, what can I expect during that lead up to launch? What will we be receiving from Xbox? What is Xbox expecting from us? The months and weeks leading up to the big day.
Yeah. So we handle thousands of partners, literally. So it's really, the onus is on the partners to lead their campaign and to lead their effort to launch. We're here to support, and hopefully we're here to also communicate what tools are there to be utilized. And so the first thing will be, to plan your launch well and to give yourself plenty of time. That means not 2 weeks before. And the more time you give yourself, the more opportunities you have to maximize visibility for launch. And those are things like planning a pre-order, which you can do up to 2 weeks before launch. So if you're going into cert and you only have 1 week prior to launch, once you clear cert, then you can't set up a pre-order. So you're missing out
Oh,
on
okay. That's something
the
that people need to be
pre-order
aware of. Yeah.
opportunity. Right. So it's really good to have that work back schedule in mind. And typically, I would say have a 6 weeks work back schedule as your kind of standard window. Some people will have shorter work back schedule. Some will have longer ones, especially if it involves retail, which is not super common on the ID side, but does happen. Um, and so 6 weeks is a good kind of guide. It means you can fail submission once, even probably twice. You have time to fix your bugs. You have time to ask questions for anything that is not clear, and then you can still hopefully clear certification well within 2 weeks of your launch. Have your pre-orders in place, and then when you launch, you appear also in the new release section as well. So that's really maximizing dashboard visibility. And then around that, and you can plan that and engage with our team ahead of time. You can decide whether you want to have a launch discount or not. We don't really have data to show that launch discounts sell more units. It really tends to be more impactful if you have something at launch that is a unique item or will appeal to your early adopters. But launch discounts are totally permitted. We just don't always want people to necessarily leave money on the table if they don't have to.
Yep.
And then after that, you can plan obviously your sales opportunities. We have ID at Xbox theme sales, which book up really early. So stay in touch with the team to make sure when those are coming, and if they're relevant to your title. Like we had farm sim sales or in the past, the non-horror sales, I think it was called. It's basically the non-Halloween theme sales, which is for titles in the summer. We'll have activities around maybe more free-to-play focused titles or shooters or whatever it might be. And so those will be visible in our newsletters to our partner, and can be set up with us. And it's really good to think about those as early as possible, but also to not discount your game too soon. Discounts are great, but once you've exhausted those, then where do you go from there? So just be mindful on how you plan those. Other campaign and launch opportunities will be around showcases. So are we going to be close to Gamescom? Is there PAX happening? Or, we do press events sometimes at GDC as well. So there's I won't talk about E3.
That could be a whole episode.
But Day of the Devs is doing an amazing work with showcasing indies, and also I hear they make it super easy for devs, because you don't have to actually be there, and they take care of everything. So kudos to them. We have an ID booth usually at their events as well, and we showcase titles there. So work with us and let us know, like, hey, by Gamescom we'll have a build, and is there a chance of being at your booth and showcase it? And we start those reviews usually a few months before, and sometimes we have call out for content, but we're always happy to try and showcase as many titles as possible.
Interesting. Okay, cool. That kind of leads into my last question when it comes to the working with developers and working with ID at Xbox, is that the game's out, it's out into the wild. You're setting out patches and you're making sure everything's stable and good to go. That next year or so. So we were talking about all these sales coming up. Is that something that you're looking for developers to be reaching out to Xbox saying, "Hey, we have a DLC coming up. Is there anything around that?" And do you provide any of those resources to them, saying, hey, we're looking for things for PAX, hey, we're looking for things for Gamescom? Like which way does that relationship go, or is it kind of always a back and forth?
So we use our newsletter, which is a newsletter that goes out to our registered partners to communicate some of those opportunities. So definitely, once you're registered, check your spam folder in case it goes there. But make sure that you check out.
Communications here. It's a nightmare. Yeah.
Make sure that you keep an eye on the ID newsletter, because it does have a lot of information in there. And then, we have an ID marketing alias. So you're either in contact with that alias, or you're in contact directly with one of our global marketing partner manager. Some of your listeners will be very familiar with Glenn and Theo in particular, who are absolutely amazing. And so they'll also, reach out if we're preparing, for a showcase and we're looking for content for that. They might reach out to specific partners that we know about, to have content that might be falling in that time frame. And then, I'll be doing the same. For example, if I'm talking to partners and I know that, we have our big June showcase, for example, that we work on every year. And so if we know that there might be game announced that fall within that time frame, we'll probably do outreach to see if it makes sense, or what could be presented, or would they have a play trailer ready at that point. And then we'll start that review process on our side. So it's a little bit of both. I would say if you're, a title that is not selected for Game Pass partnership, and you don't have direct contact with myself or Glenn and Theo, or other colleagues in the team, the aliases have real people behind them. So don't be shy about using them. And the ID marketing one, I use it for new partners, and we'll contact the alias, and they respond. So the team is really there to help. So it is a two-way street, but with the thousands of partners that we have, you have to be master of your own destiny. So we encourage you to do that. We do also do couple of times a year, we try and do what we call our digital days. And those are really, really awesome sessions for registered partners. They're, behind NDA sessions, but they're really valuable sessions on the store and all the tricks and all the kind of science behind what you can set up with our store team and marketing team.
It kind of looks like with the setup that you guys have on the marketing side of things, does it benefit studios to go rogue and basically do their own discount at a random time, or does it benefit them a little bit more to kind of wait until Xbox has a big sale on something that may apply to their demographic or for that particular title?
Well, there's some guidelines that they need to follow for the frequency of discount that they can do. So it's always good to speak to the discounting team about those, to make sure that you don't exhaust your option, because we don't want titles to be continuously discounted, and so because it's not a good look for your title. Why would you discount it all the time? Believe in your price. And so the theme sales, if you miss those, or they're fully booked by the time you find out about them, or for whatever reason you can't utilize them, then you can definitely set up, I think we call it opportunistic sales. But we're not as flexible or nimble as Steam, for example, when it comes to setting up promotional campaign and discounting. So just keep in mind that we have longer SLAs for those, and just talk to us about it.
Got it. Okay, good to know, because that's kind of a fabled conversation. People always talk about, like, what's the science behind discounting? When do you go too far? Like, how long should you wait before you do less than 50%? Like, all that stuff I know is a kind of a constant conversation in the indie scene. So it's great to know that they have that resource, that it's, hey, does this make sense? They have someone to bounce off of that is fully aware of the upcoming year slate of what's to be expected. No, maybe wait for this one or something that aligns better and will, give
Yeah.
them a little bit more of a boost rather than just being, 70% off on their own side of the
Right.
store that no one's going to see. At least if they do that aligned with a bunch of other games, then they'll get the eyeballs. So that's really good to
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
So I know you mentioned it a couple times, and we got to get into the conversation of the legendary Game Pass. So for any listeners who don't know, which would be astounding to me at this point, Game Pass is a subscription service in which you have access to hundreds of games, either on PC or on your Xbox. And that's something that I know a ton of devs either have questions about or are just dying to get onto the platform. So what does the selection process look like when it comes to Game Pass? Is it you're trying to, find one of every different type of genre? Should games that are, oh, I fit a niche that, isn't available yet? What does that selection process look like for you?
Yeah, it's a hard one to answer. I have a slide in a deck that I've used in the past where I show the diversity of titles and genre that we
Mm-hmm.
have in the portfolio for Game Pass, to illustrate that we're never really looking after any given genre. We are, obviously we want to have a good balance of uh, triple A versus indie versus
Mm-hmm.
double A. We want to have a good mixture of titles in the portfolio, and a good cadence of releases, obviously, because if you're a subscriber, you want to make sure that you've got that diversity and that you
Mm-hmm.
get cool titles month after month. But in terms of what we're looking for, it's really best in class, and standouts, and titles that will keep the audience engaged and entertained. And so I know people listening are probably thinking, but that doesn't answer anything. But we really, if we see submissions, for example, coming through, and there are three fighting games that are being submitted, and they're all falling with a target release time frame of, I don't know, October, November. We're going to look at all three, and we'll probably, we might not pick any because maybe the quality bar isn't there, or maybe it's too soon, or maybe we need just to see more assets. But if there's a couple that are really, really good, then we'll have a chat. If we really want both titles in Game Pass, then we'll try and see if there's scope to have both of those in Game Pass. And maybe it is that actually one of them said they're targeting October, but it's probably more likely to be January 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have those discussions because we don't want to leave out titles that we love, but we also have to find that balance. And so as I was saying earlier, we say no a lot, and we also say no to a lot of wonderful titles, but it's really about having the right way in of titles. And equally, if we are aware that there's going to be a huge AAA release, especially in that October, November timeframe. By the way, try and avoid October, November timeframe
Yeah.
for your indie title.
Yep.
But if we're aware of, a big title coming in during the period that you're thinking about releasing, while we might not be able to mention which title it is, we'll try and encourage you to look at releasing before or after, to maximize your impact. It's a little bit tricky. Sometimes we're not aware of what comes in from first party as well, being on the Microsoft Game Studio side, and so we don't know everything, but we'll try and have guidance to support your title in the best possible way. So Game Pass selection, pretty broad. You could be a multiplayer game as a service style that's going to eat up potentially a lot of hours, survival type game that's treated very differently to a 5 to 8 hour single player adventure game. But we want both in the service because I don't play multiplayer games at all.
I'm with you.
Um, I sometimes I play co-op games with my kids, but you know, I'm definitely a single player adventure type gamer. And so I want those games in Game Pass. But equally, you know, there's a ton of people that will never touch a single player narrative game, and they just want to go in and play the multiplayer titles. But what's also important with Game Pass is that hopefully we get you to try games that you might not try otherwise. So you know, maybe you've never played a puzzle game before, and then you've gone and tried the Pedestrian in Game Pass, or you know, Cocoon more recently, which absolute gem of a game.
Agreed.
But you know, maybe you wouldn't have gone to buy it, but because it's there, you've gone to play it, and maybe you've gone and bought it on Steam to have your Steam library, you know, completed afterwards. So
I definitely can attest to that when it comes to Game Pass. I'm the same as you. I do play some co-op games with friends, but like very, very rarely do I jump into the multiplayer side of things. But yeah, just the breadth and like the catalog of things that are being offered. I'm really big into like JRPGs, and like obviously those like that side of things has really expanded in Game Pass. You know, I'm going through all the Yakuza games right now,
yeah, yeah,
getting ready for Infinite Wealth. So like just those things I think are so valuable. And then there are easily 100 games in the last couple of years that I've gotten hands on with that I never would have otherwise.
right.
And then you have the gems like, you know, getting Hades on Game Pass. That was such a big deal. I had so many friends, you know, playing it. Oh, Scott, you'll love it. It's like, oh, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. The day it came to Game Pass was the day I played it. And I played it all the way until it was off Game Pass. And then I bought it. I was like, I can't live without it. So
That's
that's
awesome.
such a cool like avenue to get people kind of into it. And yeah, again, with Yakuza, like I wouldn't have played Like a Dragon necessarily right until it's like Game Pass. I'm like, oh, I'll give it a try. People keep talking about it, and then now, you know, lifelong fan of the franchise. So it's really cool to be able to get people in the door, and then games I've never heard of. Oh, I really like the key art. And actually,
Right.
something I wanted to bring up, yeah, that you had mentioned in a previous talk that I've seen
Yeah.
you do, was of people that knowledge behind key art. Actually, I'll let you take it from there because that was a really good point.
Yeah, key art, and I can't take credit for mentioning it. That really came from our marketing team. But you know, especially if you're coming from being a Steam publisher, developer, you know, where your key art is going to be looked at from a desktop, then you're going onto console, and people are going to look at your key art from their sofa, 6 feet away or further away from their TV, and so that will look very, very different to what you know people will look at on a desktop. And so thinking about something that says something about your game, because sometimes there's really cool looking key art, but I still have no idea what your game is about. um, and sometimes there's very intricate key art, which again from my sofa will be a little bit obscure for me to look at. So really think about what pops and what make you, like, even as a gamer, you know, what engages you, what makes you think, oh, I want to try this game. And so think about that when designing your key art, because that's your first view a lot of the time, for your potential user. And then if you can have a trailer as well, you know, on the store, and obviously have some screenshots on the store as well, because that way people can get a better idea for what your game is.
I think that like kind of goes underappreciated on the consumer side. I know devs know how important key art is, but from a consumer, I remember after that talk that you did, I was with my partner and we just went through Game Pass and we were like making comments on certain ones. We're like, oh, that's not what that key art is online, or whatever it
Right.
might be. Like, why is this attractive to me and not her? And like, it was something that was really fun for us to kind of go through and really notice that.
Yeah.
Also, to mention the Avowed key art is
So
out
beautiful.
of control. If you haven't seen it, go look it up right now. It's absolutely gorgeous. I'm really looking forward to that game as well.
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to get into when it comes to Game Pass is, okay, so my game went through the pitching process. We, you know, built a great relationship with Xbox over a couple of years. Launched day and date on Game Pass. We're there. It's live. What was that deal like? So obviously we're not going to get into the numbers or the nitty gritty, but as an indie studio looking to get onto Game Pass, is there kind of a, you know, a blanket agreement per studio, or is it very much your team really getting into the nitty gritty, and going one on one with each partner for each, you know, potential deal?
Yeah, obviously I can't talk too much
Of
of
course, of course.
the nitty-gritty, but we do review each game for what they are. And so, sometimes that's why the process takes a little bit of time. Our portfolio team will go hands-on with every single title that goes on Game Pass. They will play a build as early as it might be in the development cycle. They write up a report with some feedback and some, usually some questions as well, especially if it's early in the process. And so we have that back and forth, between our team and the developer or the publisher. Sometimes quite early on, sometimes it's a little bit later in the development production cycle. But that's, definitely we do not have a standard template bucket for a game of this genre will fall under that price bracket or whatever it might be. Each game is really reviewed uniquely by the team, and then then there's a discussion process that goes on, and there is obviously an agreement that contract in place to allow us to put the game in the service, and then those discussions go on with the partner to align on each specific term for the game, which I can't talk about more, but yeah.
We understand. We understand. So the last thing I want to get into, just when it comes to pitching to Xbox, I know I've said that a couple times, but there's just so many questions, and I've got a whole list here from from our audience that really looking forward to this conversation. The one thing that I did want to kind of get into was just so that relationship gets built from the beginning. They sent the pitch, and step by step, Xbox seems to be step by step along the way. After a year, after 2 years, is there anything that studios can do to maybe have a little bit of a resurgence? Is it just kind of discounts, or is there anything that they need to be offering, brand new big pieces of content? Just how does that relationship look, a year or two down the road? Or is Xbox kind of looking for what's coming next from that studio?
Yeah, well, again, it will depend on your title. Thinking about Slime Rancher 2, for example, which is in
Yes.
Game Pass, and they have regular, awesome, super fun content updates, and so they'll reach out to us and give us that overview. We work with them to make sure that we can highlight that, and it can be an Xbox Wire article, or sometimes by changing the key art, in fact, on the store, and that will in fact bring you back up in the new release section because your key art is different.
Oh,
Good,
little
good
tip
tip.
there. Yeah.
But content updates are not always featured on the store, but we can talk of them through wire article and amplifying messaging. So that's some stuff that obviously can be followed up, post release, and very much long term, whether you're in Game Pass or not. As a title approaches the end of their term in Game Pass as well, we have an exit campaign, which is really awesome for the devs and publishers, but also for users, because you get to use your Game Pass subscriber discount perk to go and buy the full game. And so, that's an opportunity for some additional unit sales at that point, which is really, really cool. And then, for titles that might not have any DLC or might not have any content update, and they're a one gameplay experience, we always want to keep talking with the dev and hear about their next project, because hey, if you've had an awesome game on Game Pass and it's done well, we really, really want to know what you're going to be working on next, because chances are it's probably going to be really cool. So that's the kind of discussions that goes on longer term with us, and we really try and keep in touch with devs that we've engaged with with partnership level like Game Pass and others. But any title that has done well on the platform, and doing well will mean different things to different people, but we want to keep in touch with the teams and support in any way we can, and that could be through the developer acceleration program and supporting diverse teams and underrepresented voices in that way through porting funding and prototype funding, or it can be that we engage really early on your next title that's going to be a triple I level, and it's going to be a great title to showcase at our big Xbox June showcase. So any levels like that.
Okay, fantastic. Is there anything, last question when it comes to this, is there anything you're really looking forward to in 2024 that you can share with us?
I'm really looking forward to our next June showcase because
It's
it's always
Christmas
awesome.
and summer. It's a
Um,
highlight for my friends as well. So
yeah. And I mean, generally, I'm just really excited to meet more devs. I meet new teams all the time, and I'm always amazed that I'm still meeting new teams. I should acknowledge, like, 2023 has been pretty hard for the industry, and
absolutely,
2024 is starting off in really grim ways as well.
absolutely.
And so supporting those people that are impacted by layoffs is important to us. If we can connect people, we will do so, but also I do have very optimistic feeling that that's gonna result in some new indies and some new teams and some really awesome projects. So while a lot of people are hurting now, I think I feel optimistic that there's some good things to come out of all of that. So that's what
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to.
we definitely need to hope of the silver lining. So I definitely aligned with you on that. That's also what I think a lot of us are looking for. And I'm glad that you acknowledge that yeah, we needed to we could get into a much bigger conversation about the industry in
Yeah,
2023 and kind of how things have started now. And it's very rough out there. And obviously our hearts go out to all the devs, everyone in the industry, and all the struggles that a lot of people are dealing with. Hopefully we see this flatten out sooner rather than later. But yeah, I agree that that's one thing that I love about working here in Ontario, Canada, for those who may not be aware. But we have such a tight knit group of independent studios because we do have the bigger AAAs, but from that comes these smaller teams that either go off and do
right.
their own thing, or came right out of university and did their internships at a big studio and then started their own. So there is a lot of amazing independent projects that do come from things like this. Just to echo what you said, yeah, we really hope to see some cool stuff come out of it, and we hope everyone lands on their feet, of course.
Yeah.
um on that downer note, is there anything else that you wanted to mention when it comes to pitching your game? What can make a studio stand out? I know we've gone through it, but for you in particular, what is something that you see in a deck that really kind of pulls your attention and kind of makes you sit up in your seat?
I'm trying
One
to
last
think.
little gem before we sign off for the day.
Um, I talk about your team. I always want to hear about the team.
Amazing.
And I don't necessarily need to hear about the collective years of experience that add up to 550,000 years. But like, tell me about your team together. What have you done? And even if you're like straight out of university or straight out of an internship, maybe you've worked on something really cool there, or that that's really important to you. Mention that to us, because that's experience, and that's what's kind of joining the dots to you presenting a pitch to us today. So never feel that junior experience is too junior.
Wow.
And for things like the developer acceleration program, because it has a underrepresented voices lens for this type of funding, don't be shy to tell us about how you fall in that lens. Is your team women-led? Does it have developers of colors, or is it LGBTQ diverse or neurodiverse? There's a whole range of teams that we support through that program, but if we don't know about it, then we can't support it. So yeah, talk to us about it.
Fantastic. Encouraging, yeah, people first,
Yeah,
which is amazing. So keep it realistic, keep it recent, and keep it real. Just be a human and kind of show that, which is very, very cool that that's being very much encouraged on the Xbox side of things. So I think that'll about do it for episode 21 of the Lodgge Podcast. Chloé, any final words of wisdom before we sign off for the day?
Well, I just hope that, no one feels that Xbox is ever too scary to come and speak to us. We love to hear about game ideas and concepts, and we are trying to get to as many shows as possible. So hopefully you can bump into one of us at some point and share your idea and connect. But I'm just, really grateful for the indie community, and can't wait for some more cool games.
And how can people get a hold of you? How can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on X. I think I'm Frog in US on Twitter, and then Chloe at xbox.com if you want to email me.
Perfect.
Yeah, I just shared my email.
So again, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to Ontario Creates for all of your support with the Lodgge.com. And a special shout out to Continue Marketing Agency for producing this episode of the podcast. And most of all, thank you, Chloé, for taking the time and offering your expertise and all of your advice and tips for our community and our industry. Very much appreciate that. Very much appreciate the candidness, because we know that's not always something we get on the comm side of things. So I always love seeing your talks. And again, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was awesome to be on it. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. So everyone, thank you for coming out. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Lodgge Podcast. Tune in next month for the next episode. But until then, take care.